So we're back for another edition of the Heel to the Face podcast. Brandon, the trailer for the new Mandalorian on Disney Plus had Sasha Banks in it. Are you going to be watching The Mandalorian, or were you already watching The Mandalorian?
A hard pass, and even if Sasha Banks is in it, still a hard pass. Not my cup of tea, but good for Sasha Banks. Good to see her brand is moving up, and good on her. Hopefully, more big roles are coming her way.
I can say this much, folks. If you're Star Wars fans and you thought Baby Yoda was going to take the world by storm, wait till you see The Boss. Plus, my girlfriend's a Star Wars fan. I'm a wrestling fan. The worlds are gonna collide. We'll talk that and much, much more. This week's edition of the Heel to the Face podcast starts right now.
So silence your cell phones, hold your applause, and tune into the truth.
Oh, you didn't know? Your ass better call somebody.
Getting beat up by 9 guys in Syracuse, to me, there's not a whole lot of shame in.
From the 315 to the world, this is the Heel to Face podcast.
The cream of the crop! Wow, man, freaked out!
Follow the show on Twitter and Instagram at Heel to the Face.
I said, are you ready?
From Armory Square in downtown Syracuse, New York, let's send it now to Brandon and Jared.
Bad luck seems to be my middle name. They might as well tag me up with my buddies from Syracuse.
So we're on the air for another edition of the Heel to the Face podcast. My name is Jared. You can find me on social media at KRockJared. You can find my partner, as always, at Icebreaker21. His name is Brandon. And you can follow the show, most importantly, at Heel to the Face. Not that busy of a week in the world of professional wrestling. But what we'll start with, I guess, is, here's where I want to start. What do you think of the wobbly walrus?
All right, you're going to have to fill me on this because you threw me a curveball.
You didn't watch the newest member of the Firefly Funhouse.
SmackDown.
Yes, the wobbly walrus, a.k.a. Paul Heyman.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. I forgot. I forget the name of it, but as soon as you started explaining it, I got you. I was watching that.
It's featured on WWE Shop.
Yeah. It's anything with Paul Heyman is money. Honestly, I thought the new guest, I mean, it's not really a new guest. I thought we would see Alexa Bliss in the Funhouse. I mean, that's where I thought we were going. And then I saw the Walrus, or as I like to call it, the Paulrus. And then that was an interesting swerve. I didn't know where you were going there for a second. As soon as you said Funhouse, I was like, it's the Paul Heyman deal. Let me ask you this, though. I want to transition to something else with Paul Heyman. I know we've talked about this the last few weeks. But I gotta get your thoughts on the whole segments that they had on Friday Night SmackDown last week, where it was Paul Heyman, Roman Reigns, and Uso. I gotta tell you, I love this whole deal. And honestly, I think what I was saying, I think it was last week's episode where we could see the bloodline, getting together. I could see it after that because I thought it was all respect. I thought it was all respect there, and I think.
Yeah, you said this last week, but I have a feeling that right now they're working together to build up this match at Clash of Champions. But I have a feeling that if Roman Reigns is really going to keep this going, it's going to be him versus the world. I know you want the bloodline thing going, and it was pretty good, them working together. Obviously, Jey Uso raised up Roman Reigns' hand. But if you notice, Roman Reigns gave him the look like, what are you doing? And I just have a feeling that this is just going to build us up towards maybe seeing what you want to see, but ending up seeing what we're going to see, and that's Roman Reigns destroy Cousin Uso.
I hope you're wrong, because I do want to see, and I'm not saying I want Jey Uso as champion over Roman Reigns at this point. That would make zero sense. Roman Reigns, and I don't know if you've read the reports out there, but because of Roman Reigns' presence back on the on the brand and the Thunderdome, I guess the morale in the locker room is actually fantastic. So why would you take the belt off him at this point anyways, which makes zero sense. But what I'm thinking is, yes, he's gonna go after his cousin or brother. I mean, they are brothers if you think about it, and I mean they're family. So they're I would say this: Jey Uso will be a not, I wouldn't say a universal champion or WWE champion. I could see him with this bloodline thing. I know you're gonna call me crazy on this, but I could see him rocking the IC or the United States Championship. And then maybe This is me going out the box again on this one. Maybe they make out another trade, because I know they do a lot of trades now, in WWE, where Miz made that deal where Mandy Rose is now on Raw. We saw that, but you bring Nia Jax over, and you bring her into the fold, and she's the women's champion. So you have this Samoan dynasty. I mean, and here's the thing, Tamina as well. You could bring her in. Those two could win the tag team championships for the women's division. I mean, I'm telling you right now, there's a lot of talent in that Samoan bloodline where it would make sense. And here's the thing, that match with Roman Reigns and Jey Uso, it's not going to be a squash. We know Roman's not going to lose the belt. If he does, very, very highly, I'd be so surprised that, I wouldn't even know what to do. I'd be like, really? You're doing that? But I think it's a way to build Jey Uso up as a singles competitor to give him stock where he can be, maybe not where Roman Reigns is, but he could be a high mid-level wrestler where he could be that Intercontinental or United States champion. That would be great for him. And then when his brother gets back, they can get the tag titles. I mean, there's so many possibilities, and you got Paul Heyman as the voice. I mean, how great would that be? I know you're looking at me, you're giving me this look. I know I'm sounding a little crazy with this, but tell me that doesn't sound like money to me. That sounds good, doesn't it?
What about this? I heard pretty recently something not exactly to that liking, but another storyline that somebody reputable in the back has said has been passed over but talked about. Kofi going over to Monday Night Raw, Big E staying on SmackDown, and Xavier Woods being the manager of both. While they stay in the New Day, they promote the New Day, they are part of the New Day, but each of them separate on different shows.
I'm okay with that. I think, and this is not a knock on Xavier Woods as a wrestler, because I think he's still got a lot of talent. We just don't know how he's going to come back from that. I think, what was his Achilles, wasn't it? I think he blew his Achilles out, if I'm not mistaken. If that's the case, and I'm like 95% sure that's the case, that injury is hard to come back from. I know athletes that have had Achilles injuries, and you can be in the best shape of your life, but once you blow out your Achilles, you're never the same. The late Kobe Bryant blew his Achilles out later in his career, and he wasn't the same. So, and that's the Mamba mentality. So if you want to use Xavier Woods in a different way, he's fantastic. He's always been the best mouthpiece for the New Day. He's been great. Big E's not bad. I think Big E's pretty good. He's pretty good at that whole preacher. He's always preaching to you. And Kofi's got that cool, laid back, attitude. But I would love that. I think if that actually does happen, I think it will benefit all parties, because Xavier Woods as a manager is money in the bank, so to speak. That is fantastic. He's good at that. But the thing that would make me feel kind of sad, though, is I want to see Xavier Woods back in the ring. I want to see them, and part of me wants me to see them break up the New Day and do what the Shield did in a different way, where they all go their separate ways. They have this farewell thing, and then they're done. But I like that idea. I would like to see Xavier Woods as a manager. I think he'd be a great manager. Let me just throw this at you then. You got me thinking. What about bringing somebody like Big E or Kofi Kingston or even Xavier Woods into the Hurt Business? Wouldn't that be good too? The Hurt Business is fantastic. The Hurt Business is the one thing that makes me watch wrestling on Monday nights. The Hurt Business is great. MVP has revitalized his career, because we all thought he was, doing these one-and-done matches, and now he's a mainstay on the roster every single night. Every Monday night. He's on commentary. He's in the matches. He's also the mouthpiece of the Hurt Business. I mean, and then at the end of the night, the other night, they took down our new friends there. What's the name of that group? I always keep forgetting them. They're just forgetting. There it is. Retribution.
Retribution, I'll stop you there. We'll move over to Retribution. They've been now talking, and it seems like, the original thought that a lot of people thought that they knew who they were might actually be right. It looks pretty apparent, and actually was reported on that in the back that it's been written down that they are a part of Retribution, meaning Dominic Kovic, Mercedes Martinez, Dio Madden, Mia Yim, and Shane Thorne. Obviously, it looked like Dominic Dijakovic pretty clearly behind the mask the other night.
He stands out.
Yeah. But
he stands out.
On top of that, though, it's been rumored in the back that on an actual script sheet, it has those guys mentioned. And there's going to be an NXT women's match next week to decide the number one contender. And there's like 8 women in it. And people like Mia Yim and Mercedes Martinez are nowhere to be found in that. So I think it's pretty obvious that we now know the 5 members of Retribution. Where do you think Retribution, what do you think that they're going to do with it? Are they going to put them right into a main event picture? Do you see them at Survivor Series taking on like Roman Reigns' and Braun Strowman's? Like, because these guys essentially been causing a lot of trouble, but they're not like the Nexus. I felt like the Nexus, they were a lot of low guys, but I felt like they still had a little more mainstream, to them. Obviously, Daniel Bryan was well known from his time in the Indies, and when he came into NXT, he was already pretty popular. But I just can't see yet Dominic Dijakovic, Mercedes Martinez, Mia Yim, like being in like a main event at Survivor Series, like those 5 versus like the 5 best the WWE had to offer.
I'm gonna cut you off there. I don't see it being like the top of the food chain. And this is gonna sound a very cliche and a very a cop out answer, I guess. I would put them mid-level. I think they can be in that mid-level conversation. And I'm going to tell you
top level.
What's that?
When they come out and they're attacking, though, that's what I'm saying. If they came out and they were like attacking nobodies, that'd be different. But they're coming out and they're literally and Monday Night Raw ends with them. Monday Night Raw, Seth Rollins is Rey Mysterio, like these big match, Drew McIntyre, Keith Lee this past week. I mean, they're literally attacking these main guys, so they're putting themselves into the top level. They're not just like showing up and getting involved in the feuds with like Dolph Ziggler's and John Morrison.
They're going to have this battle with the Hurt Business, and the Hurt Business is a high-end, high-level, mid-card, faction at this point. I think, and I've already said it. I love what they're doing with the Hurt Business. They're revitalizing some careers that who would have thought would actually have careers at this point. Especially MVP, because we all thought he was retiring a few times. But I think that's where that first feud's going to be, is with the Hurt Business. I think they're already planting the seeds on Monday night this past week. I think they start there. And then I'm just curious to see how that clash is going to fall out. Because here's the thing. Will it hurt the Hurt Business if Retribution kicks the crap out of them? Or vice versa? That's what we got to see. But I'm gonna tell you this right now. Minus the notes that's been passing around of the list of who's on Retribution, I already watched that promo on Monday night. I already can see 2 wrestlers right off the bat. And one of them we just mentioned, Dijakovic. The guy has that deep voice. He's 6'7", 6'8". He's the tallest guy in the ring. It's obviously Dijakovic. And then if you look in the eyes, in that one mask, there's a particular shot. You look at the eyes, it's Mia Yim, no question about it. And it's definitely, it's those 2 definitely. And if you put Mercedes Martinez in that, absolutely fantastic. I think Mercedes Martinez is absolutely fantastic. I think she is a future women's champion. I also think that about Mia Yim too. I think she's really good. It is curious. I'm curious about that though, because Mia Yim and Keith Lee were, they had a thing going down in NXT, and then she's in Retribution, who just attacked Keith Lee. So I'm trying to figure out what WWE is going to do with that because of their known history on NXT.
See how that goes together. Obviously, the fact that Keith Lee is getting the push that he's getting, Mia Yim can complain that we were a unit down here. We stood up for each other. We had each other's back. And then I see Keith Lee getting a shot, and that's pretty much why she joins things like Retribution. That's how this works in real life. That's how it works in the world of wrestling. And when it comes to these storylines, like they gave you the push, so now I'm going to be the black sheep. The whole Star Wars mentality, if you're not going to let me be on the good side, I'm going to be on the dark side.
I'm going to tell you one name that you mentioned that I'm very high on. I've been a big fan of his work. And I believe Shawn Michaels put his stamp of approval on this particular wrestler, Shane Thorne, the Aussie. When HBK puts his seal of approval on somebody, obviously that guy's got to be good. So hopefully, and I've seen Shane Thorne in a few matches on NXT. He's been pretty good. I think he's a really good wrestler. I think he just needed some juice. And I'm hoping Retribution, this whole gimmick with Retribution, can be the NOS in the car, in the gasoline tank, to get him to the stratosphere, because Shane Thorne is really good. He was in another group that I forget the name of the tag team. It was like TM, I think it was. I think it was that TM12 or what. I forget the name of it. It was that group at NXT, and they were making a push, and then I think one of them, maybe Thorne got injured, and then that whole thing fell apart. So again, Shane Thorne's a guy to look out for. if that is true, that he is definitely in that group, kudos to WWE. He needs a push. I think he's a guy to watch out for in the next year or two.
So we move on to another, maybe not in Retribution, but somebody they've been pushing that is going to be making a debut and or returning, and that's this mysterious woman that we've been seeing the vignettes of. And from all accounts, because of tattoos being noticed by Eagle Eye fans, it looks like this mysterious woman is going to probably be Carmella. What do you make of Carmella making a more grand return? Do you see her being back? I mean, she's the former women's champion. Obviously, it was kind of with the help of James Ellsworth back in the day, but yeah. I think she's a pretty decent contender. I have heard rumors that if it wasn't her, it could possibly be people like Eve Marie. But to be honest with you, I think I'd rather have Carmella.
Yeah, I would rather have Carmella too. I think, and I have read that reports that Carmella is going through a overhaul, so to speak, of her character, and this is going to be a whole new Carmella. And I hope WWE does it right. I mean, we've already seen some previews of what could be her, which our Eagle Eye fellow wrestling fans are catching tattoos, things like that, little markers to see, to kind of help determine who it is. If they do it right, Carmella is going to be a champion again soon.
I think we should tie her in with Corey Graves at all. Do you think this should be like a heel Carmella with Corey Graves? Do you think they should bring him into the mix, or do you think they should just completely pretend like that's not happening?
Ooh, that's good. I mean, I think they're going to leave it separately. I don't think they're going to involve Corey Graves into anything at this point with Carmella. I mean, as a fan of entertainment and I mean a product of the Attitude Era, why not? I think that would be really cool and interesting. But I don't think they would do that at this point because of everything that's already happened, where all the different accusations that have come out. I don't think they want to have those be out there in the forefront again, because here's the thing. Carmella hasn't been in the picture. Corey Graves is still on the air every week. And is anybody talking about the alleged issues that were popping up last year, 2 years ago? No. So if you put them together in a, where he comes out with her as like her valet or something, it's going to bring back a lot of stuff that WWE probably doesn't want. So I don't think it's going to happen.
His now ex-wife, isn't a wrestler, or we could have a return of what we saw with the Matt Hardy, Edge, and Lita situation we had back in like 2005, 2006. That situation with real life kind of blending over. Or actually, you know what? Too bad. Bring back Big E. But unfortunately, the problem is that wouldn't work because Corey Graves isn't currently a wrestler. So yeah, in this situation, like I'd have to work the first way I said it. It'd have to work with Corey Graves' ex-wife being a women's wrestler, and then the whole like spurned ex-lover versus the new lover. You could see like live sex celebration with Carmella and Corey Graves while the real ex-wife looks on, but that might be a little too close to home. And the fact that Lita and Matt Hardy, I guess, they never had kids together and they weren't actually married, even though they were together for a long period of time. So while it did hurt, I can imagine it probably didn't hurt in the sense of Corey Graves actually leaving this woman and the kids pretty much in the dust for Carmella in real life. So, but anyway, that would be interesting.
Let me take a step back there. I got to correct you on one thing. From all accounts that I've read and watching the reality, the Total Divas reality show, it seems like Corey Graves was getting out of a bad situation, and he's doing what he can for his kids. It sounds like he's doing really well with his kids too, trying to juggle that. I think he was looking for a way out. I mean, I'm speaking just strictly off opinion and what I've read.
But if you remember the whole situation, she was unaware. It would probably been better as for anybody if the way out was she knew about it first before Carmella came into the picture. Finding out, she had to find out through the rumor mills and the Twitter mills, just like the rest of us, and that's her husband out there.
Well, hey, Corey and her were already split up though. They weren't divorced officially, but they were not together. Corey was living on his own. He had his own place. So, yeah, maybe he should have told her. But guess what? If you're split up, even though maybe the documents haven't been signed, is that for that divorce decree, then it doesn't really matter. You guys aren't together. It's like breaking up with your boyfriend or girlfriend.
Let's stay on the real life topic, and here's something that's kind of been annoying me this past week. So they recently WWE Network put out the day of for SummerSlam and Dominic Mysterio. Obviously, we've seen this for the 6 years now. The WWE Network, they obviously have the day of WrestleMania, behind the scenes SummerSlam, that's what, some of the best programming they have is this behind-the-scenes stuff. The difference is we obviously noticed they did the day of WrestleMania after SummerSlam, which is 6 months removed from the event. The day of SummerSlam, in Dominic Mysterio's eyes and following him through the journey, premiered 1 week after SummerSlam. Now, the problem I have with this is in the video, you see people like Seth Rollins commending Dominic Mysterio, hugging Dominic Mysterio, saying, what a great spot it was, and kind of talking, how Ray and Dominic and how important they are, and, how it's great to work with them. But the storyline with him is still continuing. They just fought in a steel cage match, Rey Mysterio and Dominic Mysterio versus Seth Rollins this past week on Monday Night Raw. They were just in a steel cage match after we've already seen the debut of this show, and I'm fine with behind the scenes. We obviously know how the world of wrestling is, but the problem is I like seeing how they did the trick. I would like a magician to show me how he did the trick on the next special after he did the trick. I don't want him to show me how he did the trick before the trick is complete.
I'll take it a step further. I agree with you 110%. I would save it for when the feud's over, until it's done completely.
Yes. This would be a great thing to come out with around Royal Rumble time.
Exactly.
This documentary, what happened at SummerSlam, so that this feud is dead. I don't mind knowing that Ultimate Warrior and Hulk Hogan were having feuds or whatever at WrestleMania 6 in real life once that is 20 years removed. But to kind of show Seth Rollins and Dominic Mysterio hugging literally while they're still in the middle of the feud, I understand kayfabe is sort of dead. I get that. I mean, obviously the WWE Network killed what was less of it with all these behind-the-scenes documentaries. But again, the Undertaker thing, we're watching this after all of this has transpired. We're not watching it literally in the middle of a feud he's having where he's challenging Goldberg for a match at SummerSlam, but at the same time showing him in the back talking to Goldberg while they still haven't yet had that match. Like, you got to let that happen first. And, just a little bit, because again, I like to watch it in real time, not knowing, and then find out later. Because, sometimes there are some real-life feuds. Obviously, wrestling is scripted. Regardless of real-life feuds, people are going to be professionals. But I like to watch it, I guess, organically first, not know what is going on backstage, not knowing where the storyline's going, not knowing how these workers even really feel about each other, if they like working with each other. Because sometimes they might not hate each other, but maybe they don't even like working with each other. There's been times where Macho Man and Hulk Hogan were tag team partners. They didn't even like each other in real life. They hated each other, but they were together on screen. Same with Ultimate Warrior and many people. I liked finding that out years later. But, yeah, I think they need to hold off these documentaries until feuds are complete. And at least, 6 months removed from an event so that we can absorb the event and liked it for what we saw of it before we know anything. It's telling us what's going to happen before it happens.
Yeah, I mean, again, I totally agree with you. Like, let's not pull back the curtain until the feud's done. Let it simmer. Let it settle for a little bit, and then we know kayfabe isn't what it used to be. The WWE Network and social media has changed that completely. But again, let's leave a little bit to the imagination until the feud's done. Like you said, Royal Rumble, WrestleMania next year. And this stuff, I'm gonna watch it regardless. I mean, even if it's 1 week after the show or 6 months after, I'll watch it. I'm not, I don't. Here's the thing, I want to watch it after the feud's done just to see. Okay, man, you guys really played this up. Like, I mean, and here's the thing. The one takeaway that I wanted to talk about from the whole deal is the respect that Dominic Mysterio already has from Vince McMahon. Like, Vince McMahon loves Dominic. He literally gave him his vote of confidence, saying, "Good job, great job, kid. The sky's the limit," and for a lack of a better word, but you see that Vince gave the kid a hug and said, "Hey, not using the words, but hey, you're good, man. You're doing a great job, and the Mysterio name is in good hands." So that part of it I like, but again, you got to save it till after the feud is up. So I will say this. Dominic has been one of the few bright spots on Raw. I did say earlier that I love the Hurt Business. I think they're the best thing. But Dominic Mysterio is one of the other things I do enjoy watching, seeing how he does, seeing how he progresses, and seeing how what's next for him, I guess. So overall, I think I would have waited, but what are you going to do? It's out there now, so.
So I want to end this week's show on a little bit of a fun note. We're going to try to do some reviewing here. We're going to talk about the 10 best WWE pay-per-view matches that ever happened in the month of September. Next week, we're going to end September's show talking about the September pay-per-view Clash of Champions, getting you ready for that. But tonight, we're going to talk about the 10 best matches that ever happened in the month of September. This list I'm reading is a few years old, so if there's something that happened maybe like last year, the year before, it might not be included, but I'm going to take it that a lot of this stuff is going to be talking about things that happened way back. And Brandon, did you know today, in the year 2000, WCW Fall Brawl happened at the HSBC Arena in Buffalo, and tomorrow's date is the day for Night of Champions 2011 at the HSBC Arena in Buffalo. That one I actually attended, got to see Triple H, CM Punk. That was the main event. Mark Henry becoming the World Heavyweight Champion. I was at that event. I was not at the Fall Brawl 2000. I was a little too young. Obviously, I would have been at that event. But we're going to start things off with another event I would have been, and a place that's kind of gotten the Syracuse treatment, if you will, a place that was used back in the day a bunch, and since then is lucky to get a house show. I'm talking Hamilton, Ontario. It's about 40 minutes from Buffalo. It's before Toronto, and it hosted in 1998 the In Your House Breakdown pay-per-view. Remember, Hamilton, Ontario, the same arena, hosted the first ever Royal Rumble, and I think probably not since this pay-per-view have they even hosted a Monday Night Raw. They don't go to Hamilton. They go to Buffalo. They go to Toronto. I don't know why they're moved out of Hamilton, Ontario, in the Cops Coliseum, which is home of the Hamilton Bulldogs. But at this time, they were still on their good list. They still like the Canadian audience. Owen Hart was obviously still on the roster. He, I think, led off this pay-per-view event. And the first match on this list, number 10, it's a top 10 list. The Rock, Ken Shamrock, and Mankind in a triple threat steel cage match for the WWE title's #1 contendership. I enjoyed this match. It's probably one of the last matches that had the blue bar steel cage. I think in '99 they moved it over to the black bars, and then I think it was like 2001 where they put in the mesh fence, and they haven't gone back since. But I want to see the blue bar steel cage back. The black bar, at least. I would love to see those old steel cages back.
Yeah, I'll say this too. Another thing I want to point out on that match is Ken Shamrock. You know, Ken Shamrock back in the 90s was he was legit, man. He was really good. He put on a lot of matches.
In this #1 contender match.
I mean, here's the thing. He was the world's most dangerous man, you know? I mean, that was his thing. I mean, when that music hit, man, it was, you know, I loved Ken Shamrock back in the day.
Right now that obviously he's doing his thing with Impact Wrestling, but there is no doubt a lot of people talk about people that are missing from the WWE Hall of Fame. I mean, it's clear that if you're going to put who you're going to put in, you're going to put in the gobbledygookers of the world and the Godfathers of the world. You got to put in Ken Shamrock.
Yeah, Ken Shamrock should be in the Hall of Fame regardless of anything that's happened with them and WWE, him and WWE. To me, it's a shame that he hasn't been in the Hall of Fame yet. Whatever the deal is, you gotta get him in the Hall of Fame. I mean, thank God Ultimate Warrior got in when he did, because we lost him literally days after he got in. So in that relationship with WWE was not good for a long time. They got him in. He got him in the Hall of Fame. We lost him too soon, but thank God we got to see Ultimate Warrior in the Hall of Fame. We got to celebrate him on that whole weekend, on the Hall of Fame weekend. We got to do the same for Ken Shamrock, because as you can see, in the world we're in, every day is a gift. We know that for a fact, and Ken's not getting any younger. So let's, you know, I'm not wishing anything bad upon anybody, but get him in before anything happens. You know, you just got to do it. Push the button.
One more takeaway from that pay-per-view, the In Your House Breakdown pay-per-view. We saw the debut of a local boy not too far away, about 30 minutes away. Edge made his in-ring debut. Obviously, been lurking around in the crowd and stuff prior to that. We saw his in-ring debut there at Breakdown. And one thing I find kind of funny, and it's the American audience, I understand, doesn't understand, but Owen Hart came out wearing a Toronto Argonauts jersey as the heel because of the fact that the Hamilton Tiger Cats play in Hamilton, so is their rivals, obviously. But Jerry Lawler, not realizing that, not probably knowing a lot about Canadian football, just realized he was wearing a Toronto Argonauts jersey. That's 30 minutes away, probably not putting the two together, that there's also a team in Hamilton itself. He actually thought he was sucking up to the crowd. Because he's like, look at him sucking up to this crowd with his pro-Toronto jersey. And I'm like, no, he's not sucking up to the crowd. He's going against the crowd because that's their rivals, even though Hamilton is only 30 minutes from Toronto, and people don't realize that it's just, essentially like a bona fide suburb. Newark, New Jersey is a bona fide suburb of New York City. They've got their own team there. You know what I mean? And in Canadian football, they're rivals, but in everything else, they're probably together. But in Canadian football, they are rivals. As we move on to number 9 on the list, and this is a good one. A lot of people have said this. These September pay-per-views have actually had some pretty good matches. I already probably know what's number 1 as we keep this in-your-house theme going. Shawn Michaels and The Undertaker, ground zero in your house 1 month prior to their meeting at Hell in a Cell. Again, these guys in the prime of their careers, 97 Shawn Michaels, 97 Undertaker. I mean, they couldn't put on a bad match if they tried. It's crazy that we had that at an in-your-house pay-per-view in 97.
Absolutely. That was a money match. Like you said, 1997 Taker, 1997 HBK. You can't. That match will always be good.
Yeah, current world champion Shawn Michaels at the time, or not? Correction, no, Bret Hart still the champion. This was as they were feuding on to get to Bret Hart because Undertaker had just lost to Bret Hart at SummerSlam the night before. Shawn Michaels cost Undertaker the championship, so that's where the Undertaker-Shawn Michaels feud started, which culminated with Hell in a Cell a month later. Kane made his debut, and Undertaker, Shawn Michaels went their separate ways, and Shawn Michaels met up with Bret Hart. We obviously know how that went down. We move on to number 8 in this list, Unforgiven 2001. Just a few weeks removed from September the 11th, Kurt Angle, the one-time heel, now that he's representing the red, white, and blue, it seems like he's representing the whole country in his hometown of Pittsburgh, taking on the now heel, leader of the Alliance, Stone Cold Steve Austin, for the WWE Championship. Kurt Angle wins the WWE Championship in front of his home crowd. That was a big moment in wrestling, I remember, at the time as well.
I agree. I remember that match very well. That was part of my youth, watching Kurt Angle and Stone Cold. Both those guys were still doing well. I mean, Kurt Angle was more in his prime than Stone Cold because unfortunately Stone Cold's career was ended early because of lingering neck issues and whatnot. But that match was still gold. I mean, it was still good. And I'm so glad that you brought that up because watching Kurt Angle, especially after everything that was going on in the world, being the Olympic, the guy who won a gold medal with a broken freaking neck, wins in his hometown, you can't make it up any better. It was fantastic.
I feel like number 7 on this list should be a little bit lower, as in not as good as the matches we just covered. But another pay-per-view I thought about attending at the time, it was from Montreal, Quebec. It was 2009, John Cena, Randy Orton in a WWE title I Quit match at the Breaking Point pay-per-view. We've only seen one Breaking Point pay-per-view where every match on the card had to be ended via submission. I remember this pay-per-view. Undertaker CM Punk for the title was the main event in a submission match back when Undertaker was using his submission. And obviously CM Punk had his submission as well. And I think that's how CM Punk, the heel at the time, left with the title. But yeah, I mean, John Cena, Randy Orton, they had great matches. And I remember some really good matches these guys had. And probably the rivalry of the decade from 2006 to 2016. But I don't know if this match, this WWE title I Quit match, was the highest up there.
Yeah, I'd slide it back. I mean, the matches we talked about before, I especially I would say the HBK and Undertaker match that you mentioned. I think I would slide that ahead of it. I'd put that Randy Orton and John Cena match a little bit further back. Not that it was a bad match, because I do remember that match. It was a good match, but compared to the other matches, I would say it's a little bit lower of a grade in my book.
2012 Night of Champions, number 6 on our list, CM Punk, the current champion. I want during his very long reign before he ended up losing the championship to The Rock a few months later versus John Cena, who's coming off the loss at WrestleMania against The Rock before the rematch. And CM Punk picks up the win, keeps his belt over John Cena. Again, John Cena, CM Punk, I really love their feud in 2011, the whole Summer of Punk thing. In 2012, it was more or less just CM Punk starting to steamroll again over people. But CM Punk with John Cena, I always thought, even at not their best, was a pretty good storyline because you had CM Punk who's talking the truth against John Cena, who's the company man. And if anyone loves talking the truth about anybody, it's CM Punk, about the company man, the chosen child, John Cena, and kind of, doing a little off-script stuff there. So always a good feud there. Number 5 on the list, Shawn Michaels, Chris Jericho, an unsanctioned match at Unforgiven 2008. And, I don't remember this match too well. I remember Shawn Michaels and Chris Jericho, obviously, at WrestleMania 19 very well. That was one of the best WrestleMania matches of all time. But this unsanctioned match between John Cena and Chris Jericho, they're on this website's account, one of the best stories of 2008. And if I'm thinking back to 2008, that was WrestleMania 24 time. Yeah, I mean, Ric Flair just retired. I can imagine there probably wasn't a ton of great stuff going on WrestleMania 24 time, SummerSlam 2008. I don't remember too much going on there at the time. Obviously, CM Punk hadn't really done a lot yet. I think he was still floundering around in ECW. So, I mean, Shawn Michaels, Chris Jericho, both good workers. An unsanctioned match, so you know that it was probably pretty good. But it just goes to show you how some of these pay-per-views, as time goes on, just start to blend in with one each other because of the fact that they have so many pay-per-views. I mean, the fact that those two workers can have a match that kind of goes under the radar has surprised me.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, when you have a guy like Chris Jericho, who you know is one of my favorites of all time, and on top of that list is also Shawn Michaels. Even though Shawn was a little bit longer in the tooth, and Jericho, I would still call Jericho in his prime because has Jericho ever really been out of his prime? The guy's fantastic. But that was a great match. Just thinking about it as you're talking about that match, that was a pretty solid match from what I remember. And it's so weird that a match like that gets lost in the shuffle. It's just because there's so many dark people.
WrestleMania happens at the Royal Rumble. It's remembered. It's just like any sport, obviously. Teams meet up in the Super Bowl all the time, and those same teams meet up in the regular season 6 weeks prior or 6 weeks after the Super Bowl the next year, and those games seem to get forgotten, but if they're played on the biggest stages, they seem to be remembered. Hence, Shawn Michaels, Chris Jericho from WrestleMania 19, which is 2002 or 2003. I remember that more vividly than something happened in 2008. But we move on to number 4 on this list, the Battle of the German Suplexes, 1 year removed from their WrestleMania match, Unforgiven 2002, Chris Benoit and Kurt Angle. And when those guys obviously got together at WrestleMania, anytime, I mean, those guys were just workhorses. Those were then some of the people the reason I guess a lot of people watch AEW nowadays is to try to find the next Chris Benoits and Kurt Angles, I guess, of the world. The guys who aren't 7 foot tall, who aren't the super heavyweights, but man, they could put on a show.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. I mean, it's, Chris Benoit, when he was in the business, when he was here with us before everything happened, I mean, that guy he was a worker. He was a workhorse. That guy could put on a great show. He was one of the most technically gifted wrestlers I've ever seen. I mean, I went back and watched some of the old WCW stuff because I didn't watch a lot of the WCW stuff back in the day because I was a WWF, now a WWE fan. But going back and watching some of the early stuff with Chris Benoit, it's like, man, this guy he just got better and better. And when he was in WWE for the time he was there, the guy was fantastic. I mean, Kurt Angle, say no more. Kurt Angle always, for me, up until the last handful of years, he put on great matches. So Benoit and Kurt Angle was magic back in the day.
So we move on to number 3. We already talked about this pretty recently in the show. Matt Hardy versus Edge, a steel cage match in Unforgiven 2005. Keeping that feud going. I think they had the match at SummerSlam that was not steel cage related, but obviously when the feuds continue, they have to move and amp things up. So there's steel cage match 2005. That obviously, that rivalry right there might have been the storyline of the rivalry to me of the year 2005. I remember that one pretty vividly. And you know what? I'm at number 2 and number 1, and I can tell you what, I don't even really need to see what number 1 is. And I'm looking at number 2, and I can say this match is great. And number 1 is these are like both classics. Number 2, we'll get to right now, obviously. John Cena and Edge, the championship on the line, WWE title TLC match, Unforgiven 2006 in Toronto, where the good guy John Cena is coming in as the challenger. Edge is the champion. SummerSlam was in Boston a month earlier, where Edge got it over on John Cena. We move into Toronto in 2006. And this match was just amazing. Seeing the FU off the ladder through the tables. I mean, this was what you want in a main event. This was back in the day when everyone hated John Cena, obviously the ECW crowd, but now we're in Toronto, and Edge is white hot in Toronto.
Yep.
Lita. Yep. And the spinning championship with the rated R on it. Yep. I mean, this match was everything. John Cena ended up sending the Toronto fans home, not so happy, becoming the champion once again. But 2006, that might be the feud of 2006. I was at New Year's Revolution that year when it all started. Edge beat John Cena when he cashed in Money in the Bank. Obviously, they didn't do much with it following WrestleMania. John Cena had his feud with Triple H. But then moving on to that summer when they traded victories in each other's hometowns, that was some good stuff back in 2006. And number one, I already know what it is. I'm going to click on it just for formality's sake. Shawn Michaels, Mankind, the WWE Championship, and In Your House Mind Games, 1996. If you've never watched this match, I mean, that's nice about the old In Your Houses. They're not long, like an hour and 20 minutes.
Yeah, they're short.
He was, he was doing the boiler room stuff with Undertaker. He was hanging out with Paul Heyman. He wasn't really, one of the main event players, so we say. But he gets in the ring with the current champion, Shawn Michaels, who's literally in the prime of his career. It's 1996. And takes Shawn Michaels to places he's never been. Because Shawn Michaels is 95 Shawn Michaels. He's pretty boy Shawn Michaels. And Mankind is not that at all. Mankind is what we know about Mankind. And he made Shawn Michaels grow up a lot that night. And we got to see, I guess, a Shawn Michaels that a lot more people look back on and love. Because if you think about it, yeah, Shawn Michaels put on some good matches, but he was kind of hated in 1995, 1996. He's a pretty boy. He's a prima donna. He thinks he's better than everybody. He's eventually going to go help screw Bret Hart. He thinks he's above the company. And we had to see him actually go against Mankind in a match that showed that he can bleed and he can go through tables and he can get hit with some steel steps. And that's a classic right there. One of the greatest matches, a lot of people say, in WWE, WWF history. Clearly the best match that's ever happened in the month of September. Mankind, Shawn Michaels, the WWE Championship, In Your House Mind Games 96. A sold-out crowd in Philadelphia that saw the show start off with people like Paul Heyman and Tommy Dreamer and Sandman sitting ringside to where this day there's so many questions of whether they were invited, whether, Vince McMahon was subsidizing ECW. But some people started the ECW chant during this main event. A lot of weird mixes because you got the very neon color and very bright and kid-looking WWF going on with the In Your House. Obviously, their logo's very 90s looking. But at the same time, the grit of ECW being right there. So, and that's when the Attitude Era and the new generation and the Attitude Era started to kind of meet up and started the mix. And that's when I think Monday Night Raw started to turn into Raw is War, if you know what I'm saying.
Oh, 110%, and that was around the time that I became a real big fan of wrestling, and all these years later, I'm still a fan.
All right, that's going to do it for our list of the best matches that happened in the month of September. That's going to do it for this week's show. Next week, we'll talk next week's pay-per-view Clash of Champions. It won't be in Buffalo. In fact, it's going to be, where do you expect? The Thunderdome in Orlando. But either way, some good matches on the card. We'll talk about Randy Orton versus Drew McIntyre and everything else that card entails and anything else that happens in the world of professional wrestling. For Brandon Clements, for myself, K-Rock Jared, and most importantly, follow the show at Heel to the Face. We will see you next week.